Sheriff Lombardo, one guy in a hotel suite with a pile of guns is able to kill 58 people, cause injuries to 500 more, put an entire city on high alert, create international headlines. You can understand why people would say it's hard to believe it was just one guy.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say that. And in the previous press conferences, you've heard me talk about, this guy had to be I think I described him as a yahoo in order to pull this off on their own. Somebody had to know something was going on, or he had assistance in some form or fashion. But the investigation up till now has proved different. As far as we can tell, he's a lone actor acting on his own and planned this meticulously, with purpose. But we haven't found another actor that assisted him in this carnage.
Within 24, 36 hours, you knew a heck of a lot about this guy, had put it together. What's sort of the state of the art of what you've learned since then?
Well, 24, 48 hours we did, and it was nondescript. He was I believe it was described as vanilla in some of the newscasts, but I could use that word vanilla with him because he wasn't on our radar. He wasn't on the federal database radar. He wasn't on our local radar. He wasn't even in our criminal radar. My understanding, he had 2 previous traffic citations, and that's just about it. We've learned that he had some success via real estate, either management or sales of real estate. He previously was a CPA. He had some various jobs, lived in various places, but he became a prolific gambler. And then over time, he's gone up and down in his wealth associated with gambling and real estate and everything else that he chose to do. But since 2015, September of 2015, he's lost a significant amount of wealth. And I think that might have a determining factor on what he determined to do.
That first day when we were hearing a description of his background, he sounded like a spook, like a spy. He's got a lot of money. He travels around. He disappears for months at a time. He clearly had some kind of knowledge about guns based on what he did. He had his own plane. He sounds like James Bond.
Yeah, I wouldn't give him that descriptive or that title, but I think it's just because he was just, working in the shadows and nondescript, wasn't out in front of the spotlight. We were a little confused by that. His electronic history, when we went through all his computer systems and everything else, it was really nondescript. So it's I guess you could say spook, but through our investigation, we determined that's not the case, obviously. But he was nondescript.
I mean, he's a guy who kind of slips between the raindrops,
right,
on
exactly.
purpose. I know you work with the FBI on this case. They've been hand in hand with Metro in trying to put together a picture of this man. And the FBI profilers are the best in the business. Can you share anything about their insights into what made him tick?
I would agree with that descriptive of the profilers. I was duly impressed when they gave us their initial assessment. Obviously, they're still going through it, through interviews with the family members and Mary Lou Danley and other people associated with this individual's life. But it was, he had a narcissistic personality. Determined also he was going through currently probably some bouts of depression, but he was status driven. This individual was status driven based on how he liked to be recognized in the casino environment and how he liked to be recognized by his friends and family. So obviously that was starting to decline, and in a short period of time, and that may have a determining effect on why he decided to do what he did.
I mean, compared to us, he's a big-time gambler. He was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. But,
yeah.
In the Las Vegas picture, he's not a whale, but he expected to be treated like that based on stories of how he interacted with employees.
Yeah, I would say that. I don't know what a big gambler is. Obviously, I don't, because I don't gamble. But I gamble on myself. That's about it when I play in golf. But I don't know. I don't know in the casino environment whether he was considered a big gambler or not. I think in his own mind he believed himself to be. If you look at the numbers that he did gamble, he was pretty prolific, but he was going in the wrong direction. So I don't know if that had any effect on what he decided to do.
You've said in news conferences that something seems to have set him off in October of 2016 because that's when he accumulated even more guns. What do you think it was?
I don't know. You know, we're doing an autopsy, obviously, on the pathology on his brain. You know, the coroner is in the process of having that completed, which takes some time. So we don't know if he had a mental defect that caused him to all of a sudden change the way he was going to conduct himself or what he was going to do into the future that we all know about. But there had to be some trigger point. And you're right. He started purchasing weapons in a short period of time and a large number of weapons. So there was something that, you know, popped his trigger or caused him to go that direction. And we have yet to determine what that is. You know, I actually hope we find something in the pathology of his brain that help us understand this.
I mean, the grim reality is you may end up with no clear motive at the end of this.
No, you know, we're still in the process of talking to his girlfriend, Mary Lou. She's still being actively interviewed. Matter of fact, this week she's being interviewed again, but we haven't had that one salient point, that trigger point to identify what made him snap. But we're saying what made him snap. Obviously, he took a long time to think this out and processed, obtained the weaponry, the logistics, and thought out the plan and everything else associated with it. So it may be a longer term issue that made him snap, per se, but we may not find out.
Is the guess then, October of 2016 is when he is hatching this plot, that he's actively planning something like this. Then he shows up at different music venues that we'll ask about, but it's diabolical, the detail that he went into,
right,
to make this happen.
Right, you know, and I don't want to give him any credit. You know, I don't want to say that he's a genius or anything like that, but it was diabolical. I'll use that word. It was a process. He was purposeful in concealing his actions, purposeful in not, you know, conveying what his plans were to other people. At least we haven't been able to determine that. So it was a thought-out, long process. But the particular October of 2016, what was the triggering point that said, all right, now I'm going to start assembling logistics?
Him going to these other locations where music venues were and large crowds were gathering, including Life is Beautiful downtown. Trial run? Was he just sort of scoping it out? Did he have weapons with him at those venues, or what do you make of that?
Well, I can't speak to any of the other locations, whether he had logistics with them or not. And when I say logistics, firearms or resources, it doesn't appear so. But as far as Life is Beautiful, the electronic footprint that we've gone through doesn't give us any indication he was going to complete his act there. Maybe it was an evaluation, maybe it was a test run, maybe he got spooked. There's a lot of different theories associated with that. And it could have very well been his spot that he was going to do his actions, but it just didn't pan out for him. But as far as review of the video and everything else associated, he was never in the company of another individual. We didn't have indications of large bags being carried into the area. So, you know, it's hard to put it together.
His knowledge of firearms. I mean, he collected guns. He had guns for a lot of years. Suddenly he buys a whole bunch more. And people have speculated he must have really known his stuff when it comes to guns. I've seen statements from former military snipers who said, not really. I mean, what he did, he wasn't acting like a sniper, except for maybe when he was shooting directly at Metro officers. He was just spraying. You know, it takes no expertise to do what he did.
I agree with you. I agree with the people you talk to. You know, anybody can walk into a gun store and say, hey, give me the newest, the coolest, and the baddest weapon. And, you know, whoever's standing behind the counter can provide you that. It doesn't mean you have the knowledge associated with it. But the situation that presented to him, in other words, you had a music venue, a concert venue, with several thousands of folks corralled basically by security fencing. It wasn't difficult to accomplish what he did. So as far as having expertise in weaponry, and you've heard the out there in the public forum talking about he did ranging with scopes and all that stuff. None of that matters. The fact that you have a psychotic individual, a crazed individual in possession of a high capacity firearm shooting into a crowd, it's fairly simple. So, and the one thing about that mindset that we talked about, George, was it was very easy for this individual to disassociate from their victims because of the distance. He's not looking at somebody in the eye. He's not seeing the damage that he's causing because it's so far away. So he's just randomly shooting into a crowd, causing this carnage.
The girlfriend, she's been interviewed a couple of times. You said that she's going to be interviewed again. In general, do you believe her account of things, that she had no idea this is coming, that he sent her away? She thought he was breaking up with her, sent her a bunch of money, that she had no inkling that this was coming?
In general, from what I'm being told from the investigators, that assessment is accurate. But personally, it's hard for me to believe. It's hard for me to believe that an individual, I think my last count was 48 or 49 weapons, would be amassing an armory such as that with some sort of evil intent on the end. There's a lot of people that have hundreds and hundreds of guns, but for this individual to do it at a certain point in time and to do it all with such robust action, you would think that Miss Danley would have some information associated with that. But currently, we haven't been able to pull that out of her, if it's in her. But I have confidence in the investigators.
She's not in custody, but I would guess that somebody's keeping an eye on where she is.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Can I call her, I know it's an amorphous sort of term, but a person of interest she's been described as? Is that still the case?
Yeah, I would still use that term.
The Paddock family, we know about the father's history. Bank robber and, criminal, busted here in Las Vegas. Is that related to how his sons ended up? We know that Stephen Paddock's brother was arrested on some serious charges, that Stephen Paddock himself, what he did. The other brother, who's been on television a lot, you get a weird vibe from the public statements that he's made. Is it something genetic? Is it something Dad passed on? What's your guess?
Well, I don't think you're going to rope me into that assessment. The proverbial apple falling from a tree. It's I can't. I would get killed in the mental health world if I said that. But it is strange as you describe it. The issues that are coming to light as we interview the family even further and further. But none of it rises to the level of going up in a hotel room and shooting at thousands of people, hoping to create, as much carnage as you possibly can. None of that rises to that from what you described. But as far as the family being of sound mind, that's yet to be determined.
The brother has had a couple of news conferences in front of his house and made statements.
Right. I've seen those.
Give me your impression. What comes out at you?
Manic. You got to remove some of it because obviously it's his brother that's created the largest shooting in our history. But it's so a lot of his statements associated with that, there's got to be some understanding with that. But he continues to talk and continues to, I would describe, dig a hole. You can see that there's something associated with the family.
You mentioned about no one saw any bags going into the hotel. How did he get all those guns into his room with nobody noticing? Did he have any help?
You know what? I wouldn't say nobody saw him bringing bags in the hotel. People saw him. Obviously, people saw him. But 10 to 15,000 people a day go through those doors, depending on which casino it is. And was he doing it over a period of several days, which would not bring attention to him? I would make that assessment. But there was nothing that stuck out in people's mind. You know, they had experience with this individual. They knew him. Most of the people in the casino environment knew him there. He's been there a frequent flyer, per se, in almost every major casino on the Strip. But something that would make them see something, say something, I can't testify to that or present that to you because I don't know what they saw. But it's just troublesome that he had the ability to bring that many weapons into a room and that we didn't pick up on it.
He found a crease.
Yeah, a crease is a good word. But you know, I don't want anybody perceiving that MGM and Mandalay Bay didn't do their job. You know, could have been prevented. It could have been prevented on many levels. You know, Mary Lou Danley, his brother, anybody that may have some modicum of information that would presented this individual's state of mind. But apparently, right now, we don't know that.
Talk about the timeline a little bit. You decided early on, right after this, that you were going to be as transparent as possible. You had multiple news conferences every day. Why did you make the decision to go that direction, and do you regret it?
Well, you know, no, I don't regret it. You know, hindsight's 20/20, but there's a couple things I would have done different, but I don't regret anything that I did. I think it's important for the public, not me. You know, the transparency piece is not me. It's for the public to understand whether they are safe or not. And I think that transparency dictates me to do what I did. I think it's important for people to feel comfortable. People are worried, you know, you said it right up front. Was there multiple shooters? Is there somebody helping? And I think it's important to get that information out to help people understand their environment. And unfortunately, well, it wasn't unfortunate. None of the times were inaccurate. It's just the descriptive associated with the time was inaccurate. What exactly happened associated with that time. So I think most important piece is that we responded very fast. Security helped us in every aspect, and that we saved a lot of lives.
You said up front, and no one heard it, apparently, or a lot of people didn't hear it. Look, this timeline's going to change. We're still gathering information. The sequence of events will change. It did. That generated all kinds of conspiracy theories, but, I mean, you said it in the beginning.
Yeah, Monday morning quarterback's real easy, you know, especially in a crisis situation. Everything's dynamic. You know, 22,000 people attending a concert, you know, hundreds of security guards, hundreds of police officers, hundreds of regular pedestrians. Everything's all engaged in this whole formula. For it to be absolutely accurate in the early throes of the event is unacceptable. You can't expect accuracy of that. And that's why I admonish people up front. Hey, timelines are going to change, stories are going to change. Until we get to the bottom of it, take it for what it's worth, with the intent of calming people's fears. And that was the whole intent. And you saw the timelines changed a little bit, but not the timelines per se, but the events associated with the timelines. And what exactly happened with Mr. Campos and my police officers and the suspect timeline shooting. You know, give a minute here or there, it didn't make a difference. What makes a difference is I believe the suspect believed the wolf was at the door and took his own life because our response and his awareness of our response caused him to take his life.
Well, let's walk through the timeline a little bit. It sounds like from the videos, New York Times did a really great analysis putting together 30 or so videos. There were a couple of shots that he fired off, random shots in the beginning before he did the bursts. Is that right?
That's correct. I believe that's accurate. And New York Times did do a good job with that. I saw it. There's some small inaccuracies to it, but overall it's pretty good.
Were those shots maybe at the fuel tanks, do you know?
Could very well have been because they were individual. They could have been the shots that people believe they heard in the early throes of this, and that could be the ones directed to the fuel tank. And maybe he didn't get the flash or the bang that he wanted, and that's where he adjusted his attention to. Plus, Mr. Campos in the hallway causes him to adjust his attention.
So he's evil, diabolical genius shooting at aviation fuel tanks, thinking they're going to blow up, right? I mean, is that the assumption?
Well, I wouldn't use the word genius.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use genius with anything this guy's done, but that would what I would assume.
He thinks he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
He's shooting at the fuel tanks, but it's not going to happen.
Well, no, it's not going to happen. In the research that I've been provided, it's very unlikely that would ever happen because of the flash point of the type of fuel, and then the vapor system is removed on a regular basis. So you remove the fumes, which would be easier to ignite. So it'd be very, very rare for those to explode.
I think there were 12 different bursts that have been identified on the various videos where he does a burst and then there's a break, 20 seconds, sometimes almost 2 minutes. Do you know what's going on in between?
I think he's assessing the crowd, seeing what direction they're going. I think he's had mechanical problems with the weaponry he had in the room with them, changing of weapons because capacity of the magazine was depleted, looking at the monitors that he had set up in the room, checking the hallway. Who knows what's going through his psychotic mind, but that would be the assumptions I would make.
So there were multiple bursts, and then he would stop, he'd start shooting again. Jesus Campos comes in, and then there's other personnel come in, and then things kind of go awry for him. Can you walk me through the sequence of events? Because it's kind of confusing. It looked like in the beginning, Jesus Campos, when he intervened up there and was noticed by the gunman, that's when the shooting into the crowd stopped. But that's not the case, right?
No, so if we back up a little bit, because I want to make sure this is accurate. Sure. and people don't construe my words or think I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But there is a notification of an open door. Obviously, an open door being any customer that has a hotel room. If the door is open for a certain period of time, engineering or security gets a notification. Mr. Campos is sent to evaluate the open door. He had addressed another open door on another floor. He goes to the stairwell to ascend to the 32nd floor in order to address the open door on that floor when he encounters a blocked door at the stairwell doorway. And now we know that it was barricaded by the suspect. Subsequently, he ascended to the next floor, made entry into the hallway, went down to the elevator bank, got down, and then went on the 32nd floor, and then he had encountered the suspect. He received a leg wound. And then he attempted to contact his dispatch. And now that previous timeline that I had talked about, 21:59, 9:59 p.m., was him letting his dispatcher know that the door was blocked in the stairwell. So subsequently, you have a couple minutes of him, going up, going down, elevator, back down the hallway, and then he encounters the suspect. He receives a wound. He attempts to go through his radio, and then he also confirms his communication with dispatch via his cell phone. Hey, I've been shot at. I believe there's an individual in a certain room shooting out, active shooter. He doesn't know whether it's out into the festival or whether it's just strictly at him. And that's no fault of him because he's dealing with the individual in the hallway. And subsequently, he could hear shots being fired along with the engineer, and then police officers arriving. They could hear, actually when the police officers get there, they don't hear it, the shooting, because the suspect had stopped firing. But there was a volley back into the hallway at Mr. Campos during all that. So one of the time gaps that you identified that was pretty accurate with the New York Times video was we believe that the suspect had turned his attention back to the hallway and discharged a weapon into the hallway.
A lot of questions about Jesus Campos calling dispatch and what happened in there. Was there an error in the logs or some kind of confusion about the time sequence after that?
Well, no, we believed, in my early presentation, we believed that there were shots fired at 21:59, but actually it was when he encountered the blocked door. So that's when it was put in the log. So we didn't know the shots were fired until around 10:05, like 10:04:55, something like that. That's when we actually determined through calls for service, CAD, computer-aided dispatch, body-worn cameras, other people observation through videos like Uber and taxis and things like that. We feel pretty comfortable the actual amounts or the large amounts of firing by the suspect occurred right around 10:05.
Evaluate for me, now that you've had some time to think about it, the response time, both in getting personnel to the scene and then breaching the room.
Well, the response time, in my opinion, was amazing. So we had 2 officers that were present at the Mandalay Bay handling another call for service. They become aware of a possible active shooter. They start to receive phone calls via security and marrying up to security that there was something occurring at one of the upper floors. So they had a good assessment of approximately what floor it could be. So they ascended up through the stairwell to, a couple floors. Then they encountered the blocked doorway, similar to what Mr. Campos had described. So that was right around 10 minutes. They were able to do that. So you have, that's pretty amazing. In public safety time, you call in dispatch, you get advised, you formulate a plan, you ascend stairwells, you have no idea what floor it is, you're receiving information from disparate directions, and then you encounter this blocked doorway. And that was right around 10 minutes. And then our other officers that ascended via the elevator bank and came out into the foyer or the hallway there from the elevator bank, that was right around 12 minutes. But during that time, the suspect had stopped firing. And so when we don't hear any firing taking place, then it becomes slow and methodical. It's important for us to extricate the people that are staying in the rooms associated to the suspect's room to ensure their safety, formulate a plan to breach the suspect's room. Now, in normal practice, if we were going to execute a search warrant, say on a barricaded individual, we could take all the time we need and bring all the resources to bear to ensure everybody's safety. In this case, because of what the suspect did, the officers made the decision to breach this doorway of the hotel room in case this guy was reloading. Maybe he was reloading magazines. We didn't want to give him the opportunity to keep firing. And then when they made entry, they found out he had committed suicide.
You know why he did that? What's your guess at what point he just made that decision? Because as we're going to discuss, he had plans, at least a plan, to get out of there.
Well, I don't know if it was a plan. I don't know if it was a plan to get out of there. And we could discuss it. Maybe he felt like he accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. Maybe he was aware of us being at the door and afraid of us breaching the doorway. Because we know through his computer he did research police tactics. So he had to have been aware that we were probably going to come in the door at any minute. Maybe that was his decision point. And then you alluded to an escape plan, and I talked about a possible escape plan. He had equipment in there for survivability in the room. And he also had a vehicle still there at the Mandalay Bay that had some binary explosives in it still. So did he have a plan to go somewhere else and do something with that? If he had the ability to escape, would that be his plan? So there's a lot of questions that will probably never be answered. So whether he had a plan to just commit suicide there, or whether he had a plan to escape if the opportunity presented itself.
The explosives in the car, was it rigged to go?
No. No. It would have to be set up in order to go.
So maybe he ran out of time, or it's hard to figure out what
I don't know. Maybe the plan was to have it somewhere else. Maybe the plan was to do an explosion somewhere else, and he changed his mind. I don't know what the answer to that question is.
During those first few confusing moments, it's panic, people don't know what to do, there are gunshots and ricochet and sounds coming from all over the place. You get reports of shooters at other hotels. You send officers all over the place, right?
Yeah, that's practice for us. That's protocol for us. We make assumptions that there's going to be more than one event when we encounter. That's what we train for. And that was the result of our trip to Mumbai as a result of what the terrorists did there. They had multiple locations intending to mess with or confuse the first responders and create as much havoc as they could. So with that in mind, that's how we train. You don't have an over-convergence of resources to one particular event. We did have officers responding from all directions and, you know, on duty, off duty, and the officers that were working the event to address that event. But we were also forming teams on the outside to address any other events as they may arise. And if you listen to the radio traffic when it gets released, it's evident that's what took place. So we got multiple calls. People were running away from the event. They were covered in blood. So people at the different locations was making assumptions. Maybe they were in a firefight there. And that's how they had the injuries. So there's a whole plethora of reasons why. But we had to respond to each one of those calls, ensure that there wasn't another shooter and there was another event taking place. We were able to quickly dispel those very fast because it would be important to do that very fast so you don't have your resources tied up addressing a larger event.
You see several videos online of people saying we had gunshots and glass broken at the Bellagio and people at Planet Hollywood, and there are no other gunshots that are not accounted for by Paddock, right?
No, no other gunshots. The only other gunshots in particular are ours. Earlier question was presented whether there was other suspects firing or whether we had fired, and I had said no. Yeah, directly related to that, to engaging an individual, the answer is no. But what it wasn't out in the public space, and I'm comfortable with talking about it, is we had an accidental discharge in the suspect's room. So we did an explosive breach on the first door, made entry, located the suspect who had committed suicide there, but we encountered a locked door adjacent to the main living area or living room area. You know, you have a bedroom off on one side and a bedroom off on the other side. Well, the bedroom off on the one side where the window was broken facing the fuel tanks, the door had been secured. So we did another explosive breach. And during that explosive breach, one of the officers had an accidental discharge. So nobody was injured, nothing else occurred from that. We're obviously going to do an internal investigation associated with that. So that was the only other shots that I'm aware of.
I'm not sure if you can answer this, but do you know how many shots were fired by him and how many shots he could have fired, what he was capable of doing?
Well, the best, I can't give you the exact number, but it was well over 1,000 from the room, and he had access to, I believe it was over 4,000 more rounds. So he had the ability to do a lot more harm. So.
And probably intended to do that. That's what he wanted to do, use it all.
Well, you know, why would he have brought it to the room to just stack it up and look at? So I think it's important for people to understand that that because of our actions, and not just because he committed suicide, that all this stopped. I honestly believe that he believed the wolf was at the door, being us, LVMPD, and that's when he made that decision to take his life. But outside of that, if he had continued to shoot, we would have made entry on that door and engaged the suspect.
A lot of conspiracy theories. It never seems to end. They're still being generated about what was really going on. Somebody was shooting from a helicopter, multiple shooters at other hotels. It was ISIS, it was Antifa. He was targeting this event because the country music fans are pro-Trump. I mean, you're not really a social media guy, from what I know about you. Are you amazed by the level of crazy stuff that pops up?
Yeah, it is. I'm amazed at people's ability to cause this kind of disturbance. Amazed at people's mental state to post the stuff that they post. I'm just amazed at the conspiracy theories associated with this, you know, and it's unfortunate. I think the internet is awesome. It's helped us. I think it's probably the most important tool in investigating in law enforcement in today's time. but it also has a negative effect. And these conspiracy theories and thinking that we're trying to hide stuff or we're conspiring together to hide stuff is ridiculous. Yes, you know, we're expected to chase down all these ghosts, like you described, and dispel these theories. Some of them need to be investigated. Some of them need to be put to bed. Some to ensure that we don't have another shooter or there was not a shooting anywhere else. But that's a normal part of an investigation. We can't spend our time chasing our tail with stories on the internet.
The cruelest conspiracy theories are the ones that popped up immediately, that always pop up in these mass shooting incidents. It's a false flag. It didn't really happen. These are actors pretending to be dead people. And then we saw a report a few days ago that some of the people who survived, who were injured, wounded, are getting death threats for perpetuating this this hoax. Right. It's outrageous.
Yeah, it is outrageous that somebody would even present that. You know, I've told some people, you know, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I wish I could locate some of these individuals or have them present themselves to me personally, and I'll show them the what happened out there, because it's terrible, because there's groups that follow each other. You know, you present this, and then you have people that believe it, and then they all gang up, and then it's all a conspiracy. It's troublesome that you have to deal with that kind of people in society.
ISIS puts out a statement right after it happens. Oh yeah, he's one of our guys, fueling the fire. It just seems to be they were taking advantage of the moment. There is no ISIS connection, is there?
We have not found one. Have not found one. We haven't found any radicalization of the suspect. No affiliation with any terrorist organization, so none of that has been proven.
No political beliefs of any kind really identifiable at all?
No, the only thing that we're aware of, he did make a statement, and I don't know who it was too, that he was happy with Trump because the stock market was doing well. But that's the only thing that we have seen anything reference politics.
Any religious beliefs? I know, you know, the girlfriend is from the Philippines, a Muslim country. People were wondering if that was the connection.
Yeah, whether she was radicalized and eventually radicalized him, or whether he made a trip out there and went through some training or indoctrination, but none of that's been proven.
Some of the conspiracy theories deal with you. And you're in league with the MGM. We got a clip from one of the news conferences where you testily responded to that. We can play that video.
There is no conspiracy between the FBI, between LVMPD, and the MGM. Nobody is attempting to hide anything.
I think by that point you were getting a little bit fed up with those news conferences.
Yeah, it's and I stand by exactly what I said there. That isn't something that was said without knowledge. That was based on knowledge at that point, and still, I'll say the exact same thing. There is no conspiracy out there for us to conceal anything, to hide anything. You know, people are frustrated, George. People are frustrated. Hey, what is the reason why? And just like I am, I'm frustrated too. What is the reason why? Why would this individual take it upon himself to cause the worst mass shooting in our lifetime, without reason or cause or understanding, and we haven't gotten that answer yet. So like I told you earlier, I hope they do find something in the autopsy that would cause some sort of trigger point. But you know, there's still some investigating to be done. We're not done with the investigation by any means. We've come a long ways since October 1 in the investigation. There's some more information that the public will be privy to at a later date, but the answer to the trigger point, we still don't have it.
One of the conspiracy points being raised about you is that you were in league with MGM because they bankrolled your campaign, which anybody who covers local politics would know how inaccurate that might be.
Yeah, that is inaccurate. The MGM, nor did anybody, any casino industry, bankroll my campaign. There are donations associated with the casino industry in my previous campaign, but the MGM was absent during that time. So I guess that's the best way to say that.
MGM did not donate.
No, they supported the individual that ran against me, and but that doesn't cause me to all of a sudden get together with the FBI and say, hey, let's do a conspiracy against the MGM because of that. That's ridiculous. They're still our community partners. They have 35, 40,000 employees that live in our community, and it's my job to provide them safety. And so that's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Jesus Campos has been through a lot, not only being shot, but he's been inundated by media folks showing up at his house, banging on the door, and he decided to withdraw, to make himself unavailable. That has spawned its own series of conspiracy theories. Can you address that?
I think if I was Jesus Campos, I would have done the exact same thing. He's doing his job. He did everything that he was supposed to do, and he's getting hounded for it. And some people embrace celebrity. Most of us don't. And in this case, he's made the decision to sequester himself with the assistance of the MGM, and I think that's understandable. So no, there's no conspiracy. Nobody has swept him away, to hide him. None of that is occurring. It's just that he respects his privacy, and I think everybody else should.
I mean, he didn't know what he was getting into when he went up there.
No.
But he did save lives. I mean,
yeah, he did. It's unfortunate. I mean, actually, you can look at it both ways. It was unfortunate he encountered the suspect, but it was fortunate he encountered the suspect because it enabled us to locate him a lot quicker. So you can look at it both ways.
The suspect's hard drive was missing, I guess, from the computer that was in the room?
Yeah, one of them in the room.
What do you make of that then?
We don't know when it was removed. A lot of theories out there, conspiracy, whatever it was, it has all the evidence associated with that trigger point we're looking for or the reasons why. We don't know that. We don't know when it was removed. It was not, the hard drive was not located in the room, but we may never know where that hard drive is. It could have been removed years ago. It could have been removed in close proximity of the shooting. It could have been removed while he was in the room. We don't know that, but it was not available.
Could you assess the state of the investigation regarding electronic evidence? I mean, there's security cameras all over the place. We hear it every day. Why hasn't the security camera video been released, from private Mandalay Bay cameras?
Which security camera?
There are security cameras in the casino that would track his movements in the days leading up to this event. Was he meeting with any other people? Is all that
We
stuff?
have all that.
Yeah.
We have all that, and it's all been evaluated.
You don't release it because you're still investigating.
I mean, could you imagine the terabytes of information we received, trying to track down this individual's life? So that takes some time. But I'd be comfortable giving you a percentage. Approximately 90 to 95% of it is done. So we're still evaluating, like I said, and it's still an ongoing investigation. And I had said earlier publicly, and I'll stand by it, that he wasn't seen in the presence of another individual. There was stories out there that there was a blonde lady, and then there may have been somebody else helping him, and that we had a whole bunch of different theories or people that were sided with him, and none of that has been proven true in our evaluation.
Room service for two? That was one of the reports?
Well, there was food on the tray that had the cameras on it. There was more for more than one person, but my understanding, there was never a second person seen or located. So he just liked to eat, probably.
Let's talk about dealing with the media. In the interests of transparency, you hold multiple news conferences over the course of a couple of days. It becomes clear that you're stretched pretty thin. You and everyone around you is stretched pretty thin. At one point, I don't know that you've ever had to deal with a horde like that was shown up there and some of the kinds of questions that were being asked, but we got one exchange that I want to play now.
I appreciate what you're saying, Ken. Ma'am, that's not how we conduct this service, okay? If I'm presented with a question, that's not how I conduct press conferences, ma'am. Please stop asking your question. There's a decorum that we have here, and I will finish Mr. Ritter's question.
Mr. Ritter's question was the same question that she was asking.
Right, but she wanted to be the one that presented it. This is my understanding. She wanted to be the one to present it so it looked like she broke the news. But Mr. Ritter had the exact same question. And so, and that's one of the people out there that's trying to beat me up out there in the media world. But it's important, it's ironic, or it's funny that as soon as Mr. Ritter completed his question, I turned to her to listen to her question, and she wasn't there. So this breaking news that we had hidden and then she was able to find out is absolutely false. So
you never really dealt with that kind of a scene before.
No, I didn't. I mean, I really appreciate the local media. I deal with them, several times a year, and we have a pretty good relationship, and people understand through my history and how I like to conduct myself. I'm very transparent, and I'll get to the question when presented, and I think there is a certain decorum that needs to take place. People yelling on top of other people is unacceptable. So.
For a story this big, you've kept a pretty good lid on it in terms of leaks and information that gets out that's not supposed to. I mean, you shared a lot of stuff in these news conferences and others of your administration, but you've kept the leaks to a minimum, except for these photos that came out of the crime scene. What happened with that?
Right. Well, we're still going through that investigation, and you're right. I was actually surprised because during a critical incident of this magnitude, I get reached out to, and I reach out to people. People reach out to me in support and advice and information, and when the people I'm talking about are other police chiefs. And one of the statements presented to me was they were surprised how little information has gotten out. And I was the opposite. I was surprised how much had gotten out, and I was frustrated by that. But I said publicly that there would be an investigation done associated with that, because I think it's inappropriate that, in the early throes of this, that evidentiary photos get out to the public space that could, either hinder the investigation or slow it down, or cause people to be harmed as a result of it. But so there's a thorough investigation being conducted internally, both with us and with the FBI.
You have not identified who did it yet?
No, we may never. You know how that is. It gets pushed to 50 different peoples at different points, and you don't know. You don't know how it happens. But at this point, we haven't been able to determine.
The personal side of this, where you were when you got the call, and who called you?
I was at the Venetian having dinner with some guests from out of town. My phone started going off, and I thought usually when it does go off like that, it's usually some critical incident like an officer-involved shooting. But when I went to address my phone, Bill Young, former sheriff, was calling me, and I answered his call, and it was close proximity to the other calls. And he had been contacted by his daughter, who was attending the event, and was seeing if I had any information that would help him locate his daughter. And I obviously couldn't convey the information to him because I didn't know it, so I immediately started making all the calls and responding to the scene in close proximity to that.
You go to the scene. Describe what you see.
Well, it's chaos. It's obviously chaos, and I'm listening to the radio traffic, and I'm ensuring that what we as a police agency are supposed to do, or we are doing it. And if is it because of lack of resources, it's my job to get the individuals on the ground the resources in order to get the job done. And that was being done. The radio traffic is obviously chaotic, but what I could see was my folks were evacuating the attendees of the concert. I was listening to the command structure being set up. And the individuals associated with that command structure were being identified and put in place. And so I became aware at that point that some of my officers had been injured, and I thought it important for me to go to the hospital to see their status. Additionally, now you keep in mind, by the time I get there, there's not an active shooter. Now it's a point of rendering aid and getting resources to bear to help with the injured individual. So I engaged in a conversation with the undersheriff. He's making his way over to the scene also, and then I dispatched or redirected myself to the hospital. Chaos at the hospital. I would have been no help there, but where I could be helped is back at the headquarters with the command center that was being stood up in order to get all the resources we needed to get the injured and ensure there was no other shooter. The investigation, start the investigation and get to everything to where it should be.
As you're at the site of the shooting, did you see evidence of the carnage? Did you?
Yeah, I saw individuals that had lost their life. I saw individuals being ushered out of the venue to get to safety. I saw our officers giving direction. I saw, private citizens giving direction and attempting to help people with medical issues. I saw triage. I saw avenues being open for medical vehicles to ingress, egress, emergency vehicles to ingress, egress, just like you would train and just like you would expect people to do, and that's exactly what was happening.
You've been at this a long time, you've trained for this, but I mean, I can imagine that those images stay with you.
Oh, they do, and that's the important piece, George, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's not about me, it's about the community and it's about the public safety individuals that were engaged in that incident. What are the short-term and long-term effects of that? And it's important for us to have all the resources to bear for the public, to have the ability to reach out, and then it also has the ability for my officers to reach out, along with the firefighters, and along with the medical personnel. Everybody's got to have those resources to ensure that you deal with any long-term effects.
How much did you sleep that week?
None. I can honestly say I probably got about 2 hours in a week. And that wasn't because I didn't have the ability to, I have people helping me or delegating. It wasn't because I was trying to bear the world on my shoulders. It's just, you're dealing with it. Things are running through your mind and you want to ensure that you're getting everything done that you possibly could.
I know for us, we're all covering it, scrambling around trying to get the story. We're not on the scene as you and your officers were. But it was almost surreal, and it went on for days. Then the president comes in the middle of this thing, and the investigation is underway, and there's news breaking every day as new information is learned. It was like it was a movie or happening somewhere else, and it was the delayed reaction. It was for me. It was like 5 days later when it hit me. Is that how it was for you?
Yeah, I agree with your description for you. It was the same for me, and fortunately, minus all the unfortunate event that took place is we believe we didn't have an outstanding suspect. The main suspect involved took his own life, so we weren't out searching. It wasn't a manhunt per se. Granted, we were doing everything possible to identify any other players, and so you have that haste or that priority associated with it. But as far as somebody shooting up the place and went and hid, and we knew there was somebody else that went and hid, that wasn't taking place. But you said it earlier, and I believe the number today is right around 564 injured. We have to deal with all that. And then obviously the 58 individuals that lost their lives and the families. And and let's not forget, I had one of my officers that was attempting to save lives during the concert and lost his life. And I had that officer's funeral to deal with. So there's a lot of different things that you have to manage. And I think it's important as a leader of an agency that you rely on your people to help you with that. And they did a fantastic job.
There's a moment. There's a very human moment that happened at a news conference. And I'm not sure how you're going to react to seeing it again now, but we're going to play it. And
do you have to? Samuel Whitwer. Excuse me for my emotion. So at this point, I want to thank the community. I want to thank you for letting me be your sheriff and Vegas strong.
So it catches up to you right about that point.
I love that picture of Brady.
Yeah.
So
your guys had said, hey, we want to come back to work.
Right. You know, we obviously have people that are not working as a result of the event, but the majority of our workforce is standing strong, and they wanted to go right back to work, even the ones that are injured. I talked about Brady Cook, you know. So there's a lot of individuals like that. They want to go back to work and do what they were hired to do. So I think it's important for people to realize that. So.
You know, an event like this, you've been involved in some big stuff before. That whole Bundy scenario,
Right.
you were out there on that, and that could have gone sideways at any moment. It could have gone bad, but this thing leaves a scar. It leaves a scar on the city and the community and your officers and on you.
Yeah, you know, right at the end of that thing, you know, it's Vegas strong. That's what's amazed me in this whole thing, George, is Vegas is stepped to the plate. Granted, you know, we are a tourist-driven economy, but I think let's remove ourselves from that and talk about the community. You know, how they've stood to the plate, and they want to help in every way possible, and how we've come together as a community during the tragic event. It'd be very easy for people to say, you know, this is a big mess, and to start to place blame on 100 different people associated with it, but they haven't. They come together, and they say it's important for us to come together as a community to show that resiliency. And I think it's important for you to broadcast that. I think it's outstanding how we came together as a community.
You know, you're the sheriff. You're the top law enforcement professional in the state, and you're on television a lot. People see you and know you. Does this change how you are perceived? I asked the question in this context as I was out. I saw you at somewhere outside of work a week ago, and people are coming up and shaking your hand and patting you on the back and, hey, Sheriff, how you doing? And it seems like something changed.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's I guess it's the power of the media. You know, you get out there and then people start to recognize you. But you know what's really changed is people thanking me and my police officers. You know, I said, hey, unfortunately, I'm the face out there. But it wasn't just me that did it. It was everybody associated with my police department, everybody associated with the rest of public safety and the medical community. But they're showing their appreciation for what we did. Like I said, I think we saved thousands of lives by our actions and how we handled it after the fact, how we ensured that people got medical aid, and how we've done follow-up with individuals, ensure they're getting all the resources they need, getting their personal property back, and then legal aid being stood up for the people that can't afford it, and everything that goes along in the short and long term of a critical incident. It's amazing how the communities come together. As far as me personally, I would never use the word celebrity, and I can't stand, I just don't want people to use that with me. It's just, I happen to be the face of a tragic event, and I'm happy to be the sheriff. You saw in the video, and I thank the people for giving me that opportunity.
You and I have spoken about active shooter, terrorist attacks, these kind of scenarios. Metro has planned for this for a long time, and each time there's an incident internationally or nationally, you evaluate it and you learn from it and you try to prepare for it here. What do you learn from this? I mean, this guy found a tiny little niche, a tiny little crease. What do you learn from it? Or are you already changing plans and trying to evaluate how to prepare for the next one?
Right, you know, you're absolutely right. You have to check your ego, per se, and you got to say, hey, is there something we can learn from this? And we've started that immediately after event. Is there something we need to change in the security profile of our community, in the casino industry? So in close proximity to the event, I met with all the corporate security chiefs of the casino industry to start spitballing those ideas. There's a lot of things they can do internally, a lot of things we can do as a police department. So we're working out all those nuances. You know, where we creates a problem for us, per se, is we're hospitality. You know, we don't want to intrude on people's hospitality, and that's the business we're in, but the world has changed. It has nothing to do with Las Vegas. It has nothing to do with any other hospitality industry. It's the world has changed, and we have to change along with it. So to inconvenience an individual for security measures, I think it should be acceptable by the general public.
We have a lot of big events here. We have all kinds of big events. I mean, there might be 5, 6, 8 on a given weekend, and a lot of high-rise buildings. Right. How do you stop people from doing this?
Well, that's why it's important. Like, you know, when we went to Mumbai, let's go to New York City and see how they do it. Reference Times Square. You know, do they have this? Excuse me. Do they have the same concerns? Let's reach out to our partners and receive that information. But in the immediate, we have to adjust our profiles because we're not going to stop the economy, and we're not going to not do events. So we have to ensure that people are comfortable when they attend the events, and we have to ensure that we're doing everything possible that we can do. So there's different things. You can do overwatch, you can have quick response forces standing by. There's a lot of different avenues to go, and I want to assure the public that we're already doing them. We're not waiting to evaluate, but in the short term and within our resource ability, we are doing that.
This is not the bad guy that you expected. I mean, you've been preparing for other kinds of bad guys, terrorist organizations. Are they encouraged by something like this? Does it teach them something? That attack could still happen. I mean, you've been saying it for a long time that it...
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately, we have a copycat society when you talk about critical incidents, and but we're going to do everything in our power to prevent that. We pray to God it doesn't ever happen here again, nor anywhere other jurisdiction. It doesn't happen. That we put the systems in place to stop it, and if it does occur, that we're immediate in response to it. So you can what if to the cows come home, George, and it's important for us to try and what if every scenario. And this was a scenario that we hadn't envisioned, and now it's in our repertoire as far as responding to it.
You know, you've been making the argument, your predecessors have been making the argument to the federal government, we're an international dateline, we are a target for a variety of reasons. Sometimes that falls on deaf ears. Any progress now that it's happened and saying, hey, we need help here?
Yeah, I would anticipate the help is coming. You know, the government in the short term provided financial help to address the overtime issue, but in the long term, can we target harden our community with the assistance of the federal government? That's been a continual argument with them. We feel that we were a priority target for people that want to cause harm, and so the monetary assistance to bring resources were always questioned. In other words, are we being funded at the appropriate level? So that formula has been discussed. We've been discussing it, and it's ongoing, but I think the priority is going to raise on the heels of this event.
So the ground has shifted a little bit on that issue.
Yes, and I believe so, and hopefully they're listening to what I'm saying.
The idea of a lone wolf, we've also discussed that. An active shooter, a lone wolf, somebody committed to it who does not mind dying, that threat is going to remain. That's always going to remain.
I believe that will always remain, and it's probably the most difficult one to prevent, because you don't know what's salient point happened in somebody's life that caused them, or the trigger, or mental disease, or anything. But what we do rely on is the public to help us that, because we can't be everywhere all the time, and it requires the assistance of the public to help us identify these individuals and ensure that we do follow up with that information.
The concern was about the economic engine of the state, the Strip. What would happen if an active shooter situation erupted there? The economy could collapse. The economy didn't collapse.
No. I think it's fantastic. It shows you, the American public, we can't let terrorism win. And granted, this guy hasn't been labeled a terrorist yet. I don't care what you say. I could use that label for this individual. He's dead and gone. But we can't let them win, no matter what the label is. And I think it's important for people to move on with their lives and continue to do what they want to do for us to succeed. once we start giving in, and that's where they feel they're accomplishing what they want to accomplish.
We saw it on the faces of these national media people who are in town doing stand-ups out there on the Strip night after night, 5 or 6 times a day. And slowly over the course of that week, it dawns on them that Las Vegas is a real community, like they didn't realize we were a real community before. And they're astonished at the reaction. Las Vegas didn't miss a beat. Got up, dusted off, and got to it. The blood donations, the financial donations, offering to help in so many ways. It's astonishing.
Yeah, it is astonishing, and I'm glad you bring that up, because it's important for us to talk about that too. Not just about this individual and the carnage that he caused, but how the community came together, how well entrenched the Las Vegas community has become. And I like to use that word community. You know, we were considered a transient community forever and ever, and now we're considered a real community. It's funny where you still get people, even to me, they say, well, where do you live? Do people actually live in Las Vegas? Yes, people live in Las Vegas. We do a lot more than just go to casinos or run casinos. It's a real community. It's very diverse, and it's evident because a lot of individuals that retire from the police department move in close proximity to retire, and then they all end up back here. And they don't understand how vibrant and robust and enjoyable this community is.
It's a terrible incident. It'll leave permanent scars and certainly has, you know, destroyed a lot of people's lives and families. But there is some good that comes out of it. I mean, in terms of our community and how it rose up.
Yeah, you try to see some of the silver lining. It's very difficult in a situation like this. But how we rose up is the silver lining, and how we'll continue is the silver lining, and how we make adjustments because of it is the silver lining. And I think it's important for people to see that outside of Las Vegas. My concern is the people in Las Vegas and their safety, but I think it's also my concern that people outside of Las Vegas understands this is a great community, safe community, and it's a great place to visit.
Anything else you want to say to people about the ongoing investigation or the incident?
Well, aftermath? You know, I don't want to get lost in the injury numbers. I believe I gave you 564. That is the current number, but out of that 564, 5 individuals are still in the hospital. Out of that 564, there's people going to have lifetime injuries, and then the people that are still in the hospital means they have grave injuries, and it's important for everybody to not lose sight of that and continue to support those individuals and to continue to support your law enforcement and the first responder community.
Have you noticed, I'm sorry, one more, among your officers who dealt with it, who were there on the ground, you have to keep an eye on them. Are they emotional impact, long-term impact?
Yeah, obviously you do. I mean, they know what they signed up for, but they didn't sign up for addressing 58 dead individuals and 500 plus injured people at a music venue. Nobody can prepare for that, and nobody can understand the long-term effects of that. So it's important for me, especially as the head of the agency, to bring the resources to continue to help them, to keep our eyes on them, and give them all the opportunity to succeed, and not to sequester themselves and deal with it through, you know, other means like alcohol or things like that. So I think it's important for people to understand that. It's going to take us a long time to heal in the public safety community, but as far as the community of Las Vegas, we're moving forward.
Thanks, Sheriff.